Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mrs. McLean, may I have a roll call,
Yes.
please?
Mrs. McGinnis.
Here.
Mrs. Egan.
Here.
Mrs. Love.
Here.
Mrs. Crane.
Here.
Mr. Heyer.
Here.
Mrs. Horst.
Here. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community hearing. There is time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in agenda items 3 and 9. Item 2 is approval of the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the consent agenda as presented.
Support. I do need to pull item 2.4 off the consent agenda and move that to an action item, so it will become 6.13. Should I have done that first? Uh-oh.
Sorry, a friendly amendment.
Thank you. Everyone okay with the friendly amendment?
So the friendly amendment would
Was
be to
made by-
move as amended.
Okay, I need,
Yes, move as
Ms.
amended.
McGinnis is offering a friendly amendment to move item 2.4 off the consent agenda to an action item where it becomes 6.13. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
No?
Of the friendly amendment.
Don't need to vote on the friendly amendment. We can just
We just
vote
consensus around
as the
it?
roll call vote
Oh, for heaven's sake.
as amended.
Should have just done it the right way the first time, shouldn't I have? Yes. Okay. Okay. So now, Mrs. McLean, have
Yes.
a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Crane.
Yes.
Mr. Heyer.
Yes.
Mrs. Love.
No.
Yes.
Mrs. McGinnis.
Yes.
Mrs. Egan.
Yes.
Mrs. Horst.
Yes. Okay, item 3 is citizens' request to address the board. You are given 2 opportunities to address the board. Under item 3.1, you can request to address the board on any topic that's on tonight's agenda. And under item 9, you are welcome to address the board on any topic. When making comments, please state your name and address and direct your comments to Kelly Horst, Board President. Each person may speak for up to 2 minutes. Per established procedures, the board will not respond to questions or interact with the speaker during public comment. Mrs. McLean, can we see if anyone has signed up to address the board this evening? Good evening, Mr. Parkin. Nice to see you. All right, enrollment numbers, we will get to you at item 9. Right, item 4 is superintendent update. I'll turn it over to Dr. Ryan.
Thank you, President Horst. A lot going on. First of all, welcome. We appreciate everybody coming out this evening to spend a little time with our Board of Education and see everything how it runs. And we have plenty to celebrate this evening. We're looking at Clarkston as a whole. Tonight, Clarkston boys basketball is in the regional action up in Fenton, and if they win, they'll be there again on Wednesday. So we're excited to support them. We'd all be there cheering, if not handling the business of our school district this evening. We watched and also cheered on our girls basketball team with a very close loss in the districts last week. And this past weekend, our band performed wonderfully in an invitation that we hosted. It was great to see the kids kind of really showing off their talents and all the hard work they put in the instruments. Additionally, this past weekend, our CSM Tech robotics, Team Rush Robotics, competed in Milford and finished 3rd. And statewide, they were 24th out of 636 teams, and also received a sustainability award. So they're going to be preparing for a national regional in Central Illinois on March 16th through the 18th, and we're really excited for them. So lots going on in the school district. Also, this evening we get the pleasure of celebrating our unified team, and they played this past Thursday at Little Caesars Arena, which was awesome representation and standing up for our school district, and also took in a Pistons game that evening, which was great. So we're going to hear from them as one of our first agenda points and get an opportunity to celebrate them. Thank you, President Horace.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Well, let's get right to it. I'm super excited about this. This first presentation item, this was one of the highlights, I think, of my board career, was cheering on our Clarkston Unified team. I know it's been a couple of years, but we're so happy that you're back and you're here in the boardroom, and we're here to celebrate you. So let's move right on. Item 5.1 is recognition of our unified basketball team. Who's going to come up and introduce them to us? Glenn Gualtieri, yes.
Good evening, and I'm honored to present the 2023 Unified Basketball Team. Honored for the recognition, you guys taking the time to support and acknowledge the fantastic season that we had. As Dr. Ryan said, we culminated our season last Thursday with an unbelievable experience for, I think, everybody involved, including myself, for a once-in-a-lifetime experience that was just something that is what we're all about. And it was one of those, and I've described to people like the best work day I've had here in 30 years. Not that the other ones aren't bad, but it was just spectacular. So we'd like to take some time to introduce our players, and we have two that would like to speak.
Excellent.
Okay, why don't you give everybody a wave when I announce your name? I will start with Madeline Caldwell. Cassidy Kareen. Ryan Greenlee. Eric Jensen. Lena Richardson. James Jones. Luke Shrout. Isaac Kwan. Hunter Houghton. Gavin Lumetta. Brittany Vidari. Logan McHugh. And Kenzie McDaniel.
So not only do these players get a great experience, they also earn a varsity letter, and those were distributed last week or last Saturday when we had an Oakland County Unified Jamboree, they call it, tournament towards the end of the year. Now we'd like to have two of our players share some of their feelings about what it's like to be on the Unified Basketball Team. First, I'd like to invite Eric Jensen to the mic.
So, I'm Eric, and one thing I really liked about the Unified Team was, shooting three-pointers and, all that good stuff. One thing that I'll miss about the Unified Team since I am graduating this year is, having, good experiences with my teammates and having fun, shooting three-pointers. It was awesome. I will say it was a good experience. It's good to have you. Yeah. So, yeah.
And now we have Brittany Vidari. Thank you, Brittany.
Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Vidari, and I've had the pleasure on being on the Unified team for the past 2 years. For those of you who may not know, Unified is a basketball team with partners and players where we go head-to-head with other Unified teams around us. There are no words to describe how much this team means to me and how it's changed my life for the better. Before coming here, I asked some of our other teammates about their favorite part about Unified, so this is what we came up with. Our favorite parts about this team includes watching three-pointers being made on the court, seeing the excitement after every point being made, and seeing how much love our teammates have for this sport. My teammates and I have found so much love towards this team, more than we could ever imagine. We have been able to watch our teammates have a moment that is all about them. Us partners may have helped with dribbling, but deep down, our partners have done so much more for us. They've given us the opportunity to feel so much love and joy to such an amazing group of people, which is something we will truly carry forever. We may have won some really great games in this season, and yes, these moments were so exciting, but we won something even more special, a true team and a family. Thank you.
So I knew nothing I would say was going to be as powerful as the words of our players that shared. Thank you so much for the time and the recognition. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. I know we have some proud parents here in the audience. Do we want to get all the players up here for a photo just on the stairs and let the parents, let the Papa and Mama Razzi come take some photos? We'll be glad to pause for a few minutes if you want to do that. Come on up. Come on up, moms and dads.
Are we just creeping in the background?
Yes. I'm just going to back up for a second.
How can you see that?
See it?
I mean, you can make it bigger.
Oh, that's bright.
That is great.
And while we have a pretty full agenda, I certainly understand families if you need to, if you aren't interested in sticking around tonight, I'm happy to take a couple of minutes here and let you make your escape. So we'll pause for just about 60 seconds while you do that, and then we'll continue on with our agenda.
Sometimes you need to watch your mouth.
All right, we'll move on with presentation items. 5.2 is our technology update. Welcome, Mrs. Harrison.
It's a tough act to follow.
I know, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we just wanted to give kind of an overview of our technology. I think the last time I was here, we did a presentation on kind of how we support technology. And this is more of an update on just the infrastructure and the behind the scenes things and what it kind of takes to run all the technology that we have. So in 2016, when we passed the last bond, you know, we didn't have full wireless. We didn't have PA servers. We didn't have security cameras. We didn't have a lot of the things that we have now. And so technology has really kind of just gotten bigger and expanded over the last 5 years, and the support and the things that we have to do to keep it going. So the technology department consists of myself as the administrator of technology, Jason Hovanek is the network technician, Trenton Barnett is the computer technician, and Michelle Johnson is our help desk technician. To say that, you know, we run this on a small staff with everything that's kind of going on right now is an understatement. All of my staff are fabulous, and they are jack of all trades. So we have a wide area network that consists of fiber. It's 2 miles of fiber that connects all of our buildings together, and that goes back to Open Schools, which is where we get our internet access from. We have a server storage area network that has 50 terabytes of disk space and 4 physical servers that houses our environment of virtual servers, which is about 70 servers. We have approximately 225 switches district-wide, 725 wireless access points. Our Windows servers environment run everything from printing to MSTEP. The state requires our MSTEP is run off of servers that we house in-house. So we have 6 of those servers that work in a round-robin kind of way in case one of the servers go down. They've come a long way on that. It's really been happy with that. We have card access, our heating and controls. We have management servers that run our switches and our firewall, our wireless, AeroHive, filtering, our imaging software. We have a PA server for every building plus a district-wide PA server. Our phone system is now based on servers. Our backups are based on servers, a Radius server, which helps with our security so that when somebody logs into our wireless, the Radius server kind of knows who they are and gives them the right access that they need. The classroom technology, that we put in with this bond, we put in short throw projectors via Go presenters so that people could present wirelessly. They didn't have to be all connected in. But what comes with that is, there's a lot to support across 450 classrooms approximately. And the projectors are now about 5 years old. So they're no longer under warranty because we purchased 5 years of warranty with all of the classroom technology that we did. So when you start looking at, supporting technology and budgeting and what it's going to take, if you kind of figure about 5% of our projectors will need to be replaced every year, and they're about $2,000 a piece, you're looking at about $45,000 a year just to maintain the classroom projectors. Every classroom at the elementary has audio enhancement systems that include teacher microphones. There are separate sound field systems for the music rooms, which are a little more robust. They're a little bit different. We have 6,500 Chromebooks, 1,600 iPads, 1,200 Chromeboxes, 100 Windows desktops, 1,000 Windows desktops, I'm sorry, about 75 MacBooks and 50 Macs. We support the Windows printing through Windows and printing through Chrome, and we have about 200 printers, copiers across the district. So for disaster and recovery and security, we have 2 Veeam backup servers. One is at the high school, one is at the junior high. All of our systems and those 70 servers back up from the network at the high school over to the junior high, so that's kind of our off-site storage. We recently implemented an air gap server, part of our cybersecurity initiatives. That server takes a copy of the backups and then it disconnects from our network, because the first thing a cybersecurity hacker is going to do is they're going to attack your backups so that you can't recover from, a ransomware or other attack. Our security camera system is installed on another storage area network at the high school, and that has 10 servers, its own storage, and it runs Exact Vision, and we have about 900 security cameras across the district. And our heating controls and card access servers. So for our communication, we own and maintain a Mitel voice over IP system. We have about 1,000 desktop phones. That consists of about 3 servers that run everything from the voicemail to, just assigning people their phones, and our communication system. The PAs connect into the phone system so that if you're in the classroom, you can pick up a handheld phone and make an announcement throughout your building. Our 911, we have E911 which is a database that Jason maintains. He uploads it to the phone system, the phone company, so that if a 911 call is placed, it knows the location of the call. And so when a 911 call is placed, we get some text messages. Our desk phone systems of a handful of people go off and let us all know that, hey, a 911 call was placed at at the junior high or at this location. And we recently implemented a district-wide walkie-talkie system. Our mission-critical systems, like Alio, which is our HR and finance, Synergy, Mail Magic, and our district website are hosted. And so what that means is that for Alio, Weidenhammer, which is now Link, they hold those servers and they host the hardware, they handle all the updates, they handle things like that. In a cybersecurity situation, being diversified with these hosting sites of our mission critical systems is important, because if we were hit with a cybersecurity ransomware or something like that, then Genesee ISD would be responsible for the backups of our Synergy system. Weidenhammer is responsible for the backups and bringing back our HR and finance. And so it's more diversified, and it prevents us from just being like one spot at the high school that somebody could attack and take everything down that way. I'm not going to read all of this application management, but what happened with the application management is that since the passing of the 2016 bond, we went from just putting in wireless and some security cameras, and now all of a sudden we have all of these back-end systems that we have to maintain that we did not have before. And it's everything from GoGuardian to Gaggle to our Destiny Resource Manager for one-to-one. And each one of these systems, and we have almost 60 of them now that we did not have in 2016. They require some kind of user support, some kind of management, some kind of administration, and so we're all touching these systems on a daily basis to maintain and run the district. So the spreadsheet, let's go to the spreadsheet, Heidi. So this spreadsheet, Carl Vanderzee, who is our network consultant, and I put this spreadsheet together after we passed the 2016 bond and implemented this technology. So in the 2016 bond, we had $10 million worth of technology that we put in. And it was, you can see all the categories up there. So initially, we were going to have a little bit of money left over, and we were going to use that to do some refreshing of different systems, and then COVID hit, and we had to kind of pivot and go to a one-to-one implementation. We spent that refresh money, making sure that we could continue education through a one-to-one program. So when you look across the bottom there, those bolded figures that are in that spreadsheet, is what Carl kind of thought. If we were going to support this and refresh just the $10 million that we did in that bond, these were the contributions that we would need to make in the general fund, from the general fund, to support refreshing all of this technology. So, then we put in the PA system. The security camera system wasn't part of this. So when you look at this as a snapshot, it's really, what does it take to refresh that $10 million that we did in the initial bond, but also we now have additional systems that weren't included in that number. So we are going to go back and fill in some of these blanks as what would it take to support a refresh of all of the systems together. And so in order to support, to maintain one-to-one, I know we've gone over this spreadsheet a lot. We had said we had devices that we had purchased from the previous bond, and we have kind of gotten through with those devices, a few smaller purchases, but starting in 2023, we were going to have to start buying devices that would refresh every 6th or 7th grader, and then every 2nd grader or first grader, because they had iPads previously. And so those numbers look like anywhere from $500,000 to $600,000 just to maintain devices for the one-to-one program. And then as you look to refresh and maintain the infrastructure, which you have to maintain because as technology changes, the wireless access points now need to be upgraded to handle all of the video that's happening, all of the streaming that's happening, all of the different technologies that are going on. It's like your iPhone, you know, they obsolete it every time you turn around because they push something else out that is needed. So the wireless access points that we're asking for today to be approved, those are end of life. They're no longer receiving updates. And so we need to upgrade those access points. So we have to ask the board and the district to look at how are we going to, going forward, put this money either in the general fund or a sinking fund, or what kind of funding are we going to look to so that we can maintain the technology across the district. And technology isn't just for teaching and learning. It runs our district. It runs our payroll. It runs, you can't walk in the door. It runs in our security. It runs everything. So how are we going to fund that and look at that?
So, questions or comments? I mean, I really liked the way you kind of broke it up initially, and I think your final comment is this isn't just about instructional technology. An organization of this size, and we're now at what, $110 million organization, right? I mean, it just is inculcated across everything we do, especially now that we've added so much emphasis on safety and security, and it's just imperative we figure out how to maintain it. So
and we keep getting different mandates also from the state of Michigan, from our insurance company for cybersecurity and the things that we have to do to maintain cybersecurity. And all of those things come with a cost to keep it all running and keep it running well.
Is there anything
So,
you want to say, Dr. Ryan?
just a couple little points related to, thank you, Ms. Harrison. And we've worked closely in evaluating not only our technology as a complete package, but how can we look over time to make sure that we're making the right investments so that we're not finding ourselves with a gap. I don't see us going back from one-to-one technology as a whole as a district. I think it would be a step backwards compared to like and forward-thinking districts. I think we will be evaluating with Ms. Mahoney, Instructional Services, our parents, our families, and our community, some of the aspects of one-to-one over the next year, including possibly potentially reducing the one-to-one below fourth grade. I think that's in the cards, looking at our use and how we're having students. We want them immersed, but we also want them getting dirty, playing outside, and doing all that piece too, and that line in the sand from where technology becomes kind of an asset to just one more thing they're staring at when they go home. That being said, when we talk about our budget priorities later on in this meeting, I think it's high tide that we take responsibility for the level of that one-to-one devices. I don't want to go for that element in any aspect of the community to ask them to help support any auxiliary or alternate funding. And I think from our study from the budgeting that I've done with Mr. Lucido and Mr. Rogers, that we can present a budget to you in the next 4 to 6 weeks that would include that pushing forward, and that, as you heard, $600,000 range to cover that. Additionally, in working with Mr. Goodman and evaluating the entire broad spectrum of our bond, I do believe that it is very, very likely, and I think an absolute, that we're going to be using some of those bond funds for covering some of the switches and the long-term closets and other things that we need to accomplish. If Ms. Harrison recalls back to some of the early meetings, we were talking about spending and budget priorities within the bond, and I know at the time over the last 2 years we've included board members in those conversations. I've been one to always make sure to advocate that we keep it running, because I, for one, remember the days when we didn't have wireless, we didn't have reliable computers, we couldn't do testing, all elements of our security. We were in many ways kind of a backwards district with respect to technology, and with the last bond in 2016, we managed to kind of slingshot up to kind of a premium level. So with Ms. Harrison's and working with CBD, some of the consulting firms that we've had to evaluate the technology, I think we're ready to make that jump, and I would estimate over the next number of years that the technology aspects and assets of our district will be evaluated and viewed very similarly to transportation and some other things we take for granted that we just budget yearly in the cycle, and I think that's what it needs to be. I don't foresee us ever going in Clarkston again back in a bond type proposal looking for end user devices, even though we amortize them properly to make sure they're paid within the segment we collect. I'm not comfortable with that, and I think we're ready to kind of move forward with some bold new pieces with respect to the overall technology package. So that would be my 2 cents. Thank you, President Horace.
Ms. Egan?
Just a few questions of clarification. So we're used to seeing things usually by budget year, which is July 1st to June 30th. So is the 2023 number, is that for the calendar, January 1 to December 31st, or is that like school year? So 2023 is this school year or this fall school year?
So we are purchasing them now. We wanted to make sure we got them on the budget now so that we could prepare them over the summer and then hand them out really in the beginning of the 2023-2024 school year.
Okay. And then, I did have another question. Oh, do we know what % of our students bring their own devices at, say, the secondary level?
Well, interestingly, it's a danger-double-edged question because technically none, but all of them have at least one other device on them. And when we evaluate the depth of our wireless, now we're at the assumption that everybody in that building has at least 3 devices. Sometimes it's a watch or a phone and computer or a personal device that they're hitting the internet with. And Ms. Harrison would tell you that it causes them fits. And then you have the added benefit or detriment of surrounding wireless, like a church that might be nearby or other that has its own wireless also has been impacting, our ability to have reliable wireless. So we keep fighting the fight every day.
And some of the students do bring their own personal, computer.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult because, so the testing applications that we push them out to our domain computers. And so if a student has a personal device, they can't do the testing from that device. Any of the other applications that we push out, they don't show up on those devices. So sometimes, they're able to complete some things, but they can't do everything with a personal device.
I'm just looking at, your comments, or considering your comments about wireless support, and I'm just wondering where are we from a capacity standpoint with the watches, the phones, the school device?
Well, we're in the process of evaluating that as well, and we do have some ability to shut off outside devices, phones, and other things from logging into our network. So, yeah, we're monitoring that closely.
Okay.
That's part of the wireless that we're asking to be approved tonight is to upgrade these access points, which will help ease some of that.
Traffic control? Yep, okay. All right, thank you.
And when you say end of life, does that mean they can't be upgraded anymore?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And is that a necessary expense to do right now, or do we have another couple years before we need to upgrade it?
So the end of life wireless access points, we really need to remove from our network and upgrade them with access points that are supported. And that will just help keep our entire system, because they all kind of talk to each other. It will help keep our entire system working more reliably and robust. With this particular approval, we're going through our E-rate. And so E-rate is I hope I explained it properly, but E-rate is a federal program that helps school districts with networking and infrastructure purchases. And so each district kind of gets a certain amount of money, and then it depends on your free and reduced lunch, what rate you get reimbursed at. So we will get reimbursed for 50% of the $375,000 that we're asking for approval tonight. So this program will actually cost us $175,000
Oh, that's great to know.
in the end. So we try to utilize E-rate to the fullest when when we can.
And with the one-to-one, we're saying a lot of kids bring in their own computers, but you don't have the capability of doing some of the testing on them. Is there a way, I mean, has it been discussed that, you know, the families, I'm sure a lot of the families in the district want to use their own device, let alone have them? I mean, can we download this technology on their device? I mean, that could be a really huge cost saving for this one-to-one if we gave the option at the beginning of the year to use your own. Is that something that can be done? I don't know.
So the
but-
only way that it can be done is if the family donates the device to the district. Because
Okay.
we have
You'd
to
have to
then
give it back.
put it onto our management system. We have to import all of the settings, and it just becomes very difficult on a support level because we don't know how many different devices they have. Some students might bring a Windows computer, some might bring a Chrome device, and in order to support all of that, if the student is having an issue, we can't support personal devices. If we put it on our system, we have to support it. So it just becomes a gray area. It becomes very, very difficult for us to support.
And is the one-to-one that you're asking for today, is that giving every first grader, second grader a computer instead of an iPad?
Yes.
Okay, and what are we doing with the iPads?
So the iPads, because the iPads are from young fives to first grade, right? Okay. From young fives to first grade, that's only a 3-year span. And so the ones that are in first grade, they'll get brought back, they'll wipe them, they'll refresh them, they'll clean them up, and they'll give them to young fives. So those, you know, as much as possible, we always take devices and roll them back down. So we won't need to purchase iPads as often as we will need to purchase Chromebooks. So next year, when we're looking to purchase devices to maintain one-to-one, we won't have as many iPads. But the iPads, the reason that we have so many this time is because as we've gone through these few years of one-to-one, we haven't really purchased any iPads to maintain those
And
levels.
has it been decided, because in my personal opinion, I'm not sure that it's necessary for a first and second grader to have a computer. I think in third grade it starts to be more necessary. It seems like the perfect time to kind of make that adjustment. I mean, but that's maybe just me, but I think the board, we need to have a conversation about maintaining these costs, and I know this year will be fine, I think, but looking down the road, you know, in your presentation you did mention a sinking fund. I don't want to rely on that. I mean, personal opinions aside, I don't know that it will pass this district. I mean, we just passed a non-millage bond by 53% in a Democratic landslide year. I don't want to rely on that as funding. So I think we need to have a larger conversation about the future of technology, how we're going to maintain it. I mean, these are massive costs. And with the one-to-one, if we are thinking about doing it, why not now? I mean, I guess if we have the money now, we could do it for first and second grade and then cut back, and then we won't have to buy as many replacement computers in the future. But, I mean, Sean, is that something you would be interested in? I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of that evaluation piece of it. And anything we purchase will not be wasted as part of this because we'll put it right in with the labs because we will need it, classroom sets and things for them to use during the day. It's just a matter that the replacement cycle and everything is not as broad because we have a greater, tighter control and there's much less use on them on a day-to-day basis. So I don't see that as a pivot point that will trip us up. I do agree with you in terms of looking in the very short term for, you know, a long-term projection for technology utilization cost and being able to have that total cost of ownership. But that other piece of making sure that we keep it right for the kids right now, because the expectation is extremely high that it all works. And even to your point of looking at the bring your own device model, it's almost impossible. I would say, I think Ms. Harrison's being generous to say that it would be very difficult. I would say impossible based on our current technology setup, and that just because everyone requires a different type setup, a different kind of support. Becomes you would need a support, probably, I'm going to take a stab at maybe 25 plus people to maintain in that neighborhood that many different kinds of devices. Counting
You're kinda
techs.
killing two birds with one stone, though, because you're saving money, and you don't have these multiple devices loading up our system. I mean,
Right. So if we do that and make the decision not to go one to one, and let's say below fourth grade or below third grade, or however we decide to offer that recommendation up, the investment that we're making here will be 100% utilized and not wasted.
but I just think it's harder. So now they have iPads first and second grade. If we move,
Yeah, iPads are through.
Just through first grade, correct?
Young fives through first grade.
Yeah.
so if we move to computers now, the future families are, with the younger siblings, they're going to come to expect that their first grader comes home with a computer. So why wouldn't we just stop with it now?
I don't think first graders are getting laptops, though. No?
With this new one, they are, right?
No.
No, second grade.
No.
Second grade?
So
Right.
this year's first graders will be getting,
iPads?
This year's first graders, when they get to second grade, they're first grade right now, so they're gonna be in second grade, they're gonna get a Chromebook.
they get Chromebooks next year.
The first graders have iPads. Young fives through first grade have iPads, second through 12th have Chromebooks.
And a changing away from one to one for those grades would not necessitate a changing necessary of those devices for those classes either. They might be kindergartners still using, iPads. They just won't be bringing them home. So, no, your point's taken, though. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do
Yes.
believe there's a different application too for young fives to first graders when it comes to an iPad. I have a 4.5-year-old, and I know you probably have children who have an iPad too. Their use of an iPad, my granddaughter can do unbelievable things on that iPad. If I put a computer in front of her, it would be day and night difference between her accessibility to it and utilization of it compared to what an iPad can do for a young 5 to a first grader. So I do think we're doing good with what we have. I think it's good for us to continue to look at how can we continue to utilize what we have and reduce the purchasing impact, as you're saying, as we continue to move forward. I think, we always got to keep our eye on what's changing and how do we need to change to adapt to it. So I
Right.
think your points are all very well taken.
I think by third grade is when they start taking the M-STEP, right? And so by third grade, they need to be a little proficient on those Chromebooks. So they need second grade to start learning those tech tools and how am I going to use a mouse and because taking the M-STEP isn't just about the content of the test, it's how do I take the test on this device and use my mouse and scroll down and choose different things. So that gives them a year to get familiar with the Chrome devices before they start having to do state testing as well.
Certainly as our priorities, our priorities continue to evolve, and I know you're always looking at that. I mean, the devices are only one piece of this, and I don't even know if they're the most expensive piece,
Right, they're not.
right? I mean,
Right.
given the volume of what you've just shared with us. So I think it's important to kind of continue to weigh all those elements and constantly say, now we're adding a lot of it in safety, and now we're revising the laptops. And so I certainly appreciate having this constant look, and certainly we'll look at this again and continue to evaluate those needs. Any other questions or comments for Mrs. Harrison? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to action items then. 6.1 is approval recognition of board trustee resignation. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education accepts Ms. Catalina's resignation from the board and recognizes her 6+ years as a board member.
Support? Support?
All right, thank you. Sorry, I know
Sorry,
we
I know,
we have the
Laryngitis.
sniffles up here at the board table tonight. So as I think certainly our board and our community knows by now, Mrs. Catalina submitted her resignation to the board a week ago. She has added greater professional responsibilities and was becoming increasingly concerned that would conflict with the time and attention that she could give her board responsibilities. She had been a member of this board for, I think, going on 7 years. She's a teacher in another district, and I know in many of the discussions we had, a lot of them in our workshops, in our closed sessions, she always provided us, as Ms. McGinnis shared with me as we were discussing it, really valuable insight into the practice of teaching, the mindset of teachers, and I think it was a voice that was very valuable to the discussions that we had from that stakeholder perspective. So we certainly wish Ms. Catalina well as she continues along her professional journey. And we now have to turn our attention, of course, to filling our empty seat. We'll talk about that a little later tonight, but we do want to thank Ms. Catalina for her service to Clarkston schools. As she said to me, serving students is her passion, and she has directed that passion to Clarkston students for some time, but she now has to give the majority of that attention to the district in which she is employed. So good luck to you, Mrs. Catalina, and we thank you from Clarkston Schools. So obviously we'll be in touch with her when it's tree planting time. Doesn't look like it's tree planting time just yet, so we'll be in touch with her and figure out where we can honor her come spring, late spring, as we call it. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.2 is approval of personnel changes. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the personnel changes as listed on the attached sheets.
Support.
Are there any questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.3 is approval of open enrollment programs. This is written as one motion, which I will entertain unless anyone is going to raise a question about a specific program. Then I will entertain one motion for all as written on the bar.
I move that the Board of Education approves the resolutions authorizing limited open enrollment for young fives kindergarten and unlimited open enrollment for CSM Tech program, International Baccalaureate Diploma program, Career Immersions program, Construction Technology program, and online and blended learning for the 2023-24 school year as presented.
Support.
Are there any questions or discussion? I mean, we approve these programs every year. And our young fives in kindergarten, again, we'll have 25 seats dedicated to it, and I know more information will be forthcoming from the district in terms of families who wish to apply for those seats. And the others as well, the recruitment and open recruitment cycle for that will be, I believe, there's a window for that, correct? I'm looking at Mr. Lucido, yes, that'll be later this spring, yes. And those are unlimited seats, so beyond what we accept for our Clarkston students, unlimited availability for those outside of the district who are maybe interested in those other programs. But these are approvals that we do every single spring. Other questions or discussion?
Just to clarify, the unlimited programs have ongoing enrollment. The limited program is the one that has the window.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it's just I see the marketing for it, and I think that's when they're.
Right.
All right, thank you. Then Mrs. McLean, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mrs. Crane?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Heyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Egan?
Yes.
Mrs. Horst?
Yes. The motion carries. Item 6.4 is approval of commemoration of Clarkston High School Performing Arts Center. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the commemoration of Clarkston High School Performing Arts Center in the memory of Barbara Gibson as presented.
Support.
Dr. Ryan, I know Mrs. Seaman is here from our high school theater program, and I wondered if you might just give us all in our community an overview of who we're honoring and why with this commemoration.
I'll invite Ms. Seaman up. Come on up.
Come on up.
My recollections of Ms. Gibson back when I was a freshman teacher back here in Clarkston were ones of somebody had an incredible passion for the arts and really stopped at nothing to build a program in Clarkston that really had some humble beginnings. And now it is what it is today, and it was definitely on her shoulders. And she cared not only about the arts, but the kids and the staff. at the high school and within the community, especially with her famous son at the time. You know, Kurt Gibson with baseball was always a big kind of, you know, aspect of larger-than-life family. From themselves, very humble beginnings in Waterford. So I don't think you could add some pieces to that as well.
Well, as you said, she spent her entire career single-handedly building our theater department, which has since continued to become a source of pride in the community, which is a really lovely thing to see with the Clarkston community rally behind our theater program. She did establish our theater troupe, which is Troop 803 in 1968, and she registered us and we became a member of the International Thespian Society in 1970. I always get a really big kick out of going to Thespian Festival and seeing our number is 803, when now there's 5 digits worth of troop numbers. So to me that says how long we've been established, and that's kind of a rare thing. So the Gibson Foundation, with generous support from Kirk, has funded many, many, many years of scholarships for our theater students, or kids performing or pursuing a career in the arts, not necessarily acting, but in the arts in general. And I was actually the first recipient of the scholarship back in 1992. And over the years, we've received over $53,000 worth of scholarships from the Gibson Foundation. So we would love to do a celebration of her memory at Clarkston High School and tie this to an event, perhaps the musical, which was her big thing. Or if not, kick off the fall school year with a special event to commemorate her and the legacy that she leaves at Clarkston High School that we hope to continue and honor her. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? I know, I think we've been pretty fortunate in Clarkston to have people like Mrs. Gibson. We've had Dan Fife, Mel Vara, I mean some pretty all-star players in our community who have made an incredible impact. And we have commemorated and named certain facilities after those folks who've contributed so much in certain areas. And you know, Dr. Ryan and I were reminiscing about that ahead of tonight. And I thought, you know, it's actually fairly rare, I think, to have 3 people of that caliber to make that kind of impact, where you want to commemorate a facility like that. That said, you know, I think as a board, we do want to make sure that we have some parameters and some consistency when an opportunity like this comes up. And so I had asked our policy committee to look at what is out there in terms of policies for commemoration, for sponsorships, for those kinds of things. And I know, board, you were all asked to provide feedback on that. And so that will be coming to, I think, probably a future meeting soon, so we can ensure that going forward, you know, hopefully we have another all-star staff member of this caliber, and we may need those kinds of parameters in front of us. But I know we want to make that distinction in terms of, you know, having a very high level of standard for this kind of commemoration going forward, and to understand the distinction between what is a commemoration versus, say, a sponsored kind of recognition, say, that exists at our football field.
Madam President, you're absolutely right. The policy committee did have a very in-depth conversation regarding allowing this particular bar to move forward in this time frame. We felt that while we had not come to any specific decision on the specific language of any particular policy on this, we did seek input from board members, and we felt that this action was at a high enough level consistent with the types of things the board may do in the future. So that's why we allowed for this to go ahead and move forward while we were still working on the actual verbiage of a policy itself.
Great, thank you. All right. Seeing no other comments or questions, we have a motion on the table to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.5 is approval of the one-to-one device purchase. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the purchase of Chromebooks iPads warranty and cases in the amount of $648,628 as presented.
Support.
And I know we just heard from Mrs. Harrison in terms of our overall scope of technology and, you know, a financial picture here, and you can see from this bar, the source of funds for this is still coming out of our bond, our first big refresh. Are there any other additional questions for Ms. Harrison at this time? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. One opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.6 is approval of E-rate network electronics. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the Network Electronics fiscal year 2023 USF bid in the amount of $346,550.55 to Delta Networks, contingent upon approval of E-rate funding as presented.
Support.
Any questions or further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.7 is approval of bid to purchase bus security cameras. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the bid as presented to Moss of Grand Rapids, Michigan in the amount of $448,917.31 as presented.
Support.
Are there any questions or discussion?
I would like to discuss it. It's $500,000. And I just, you know, I'm the transportation liaison for the board. I just haven't heard anything about it. If you ask any parent their concerns about buses, it's mainly why, you know, my kid is getting here a half hour later than they say they're going to on half days. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I just feel like it's our due diligence as a board when we're approving $500,000. I want to have some discussion about it.
Okay.
So,
Just to kind of kick it off, you know, we've been not at the front end of putting cameras on the buses. We literally are, I believe, the only school district in Oakland County that hasn't. And we've been struggling over the last several years with the frequency and the intensity of discipline issues that arise, not on a moment-by-moment basis, but they come as aberrations, just like you'd have in a classroom. And with elements right now, especially with the advent of these, everybody is an eyewitness, and the issue is if we would receive these with perfect footage of every, you know, the angle, and not cutting out any parts that were either edited or not included, would be one thing. But obviously they're coming from students literally filming these, and we're getting our hands on them, and then they become public. Kind of at that point in our maturity as a school district to kind of look at that as an additional safety. And then we have simultaneously a large investment from the state of Michigan in areas like this that they want us to invest in. So
what does that mean? Are we getting funding from the state of Michigan for this?
We are. We have $109 per pupil to spend on safety between now and June of '24. So this we were going to apply this to it. We've done a lot and got safety grants over the last couple of years, but and we'll do a presentation as we, you know, develop more of what we're going to spend this on. But we thought this would be a wonderful thing to get for our school district. As Dr. Ryan, a lot of discipline issues that happen on the bus. We're getting videos that were taped by kids. It would benefit us for that. But that is what we're using this money for. It's not coming out of general fund.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes a huge difference.
It is,
and
yes.
Also, I don't know that having cameras is going to fix I mean, kids are still going to tape it. I mean, I don't think that solves our problem,
But to have more of a, we'll call it official copy.
It would be nice if it deterred some behaviors. You know, some of our buses have, you know, they're over 50 kids. Most of our buses actually are over 50 kids. So it might help with some of the supervision issues that we have with just having one bus driver, you know, trying to supervise that while driving the bus. Hopefully it will deter some behavior.
Plus, with the advent not having enough drivers and having multiple age groups on there, many parents have expressed to me concerns to move away from that as fast as we can. But in interim, just to have this added piece to have that safety element for us to be able to monitor it, be helpful.
And can these cameras be transferred if we upgrade buses at some point?
Yeah, our buses are leased, so that is definitely gonna have to be something that is the case. But this, we're gonna look at our servers, just for all of our cameras. We have some areas and buildings we're gonna look at that maybe the principal wish they had a camera in this one area that we don't. That's what we're looking to spend, you know, a good portion of that money, because that's almost $1 million for us to spend. So this would be half of it, but it seemed like a prudent way to spend that.
Okay, well, now that you say that, you said it's $109 per pupil we have to
Yes.
spend on.
Mhm.
Okay, that's great then. And then with this one bid, I mean, is there any, I mean, it just seems like maybe I just want to try to, I don't know, put it on social media or something. It just seems like, why are we only getting one bid for a $500,000 project? Seems, and I know you tried, but is it completely exhausted? Like, has all resources completely been exhausted?
To put those bids out on different channels, so it went out to over 90 different areas, and Carl Vanderzee, who is our consultant from CED, so when we had the initial bid opening, nobody showed up. And we had a pre-bid meeting where there were, I think there were at least 3 vendors at the pre-bid meeting to discuss the project. And so then on the bid opening, there was nobody. And so Carl then individually contacted the ones that showed up to the pre-bid meeting and said, hey, you know, what's going on? And some of them were just too busy to take on the added project. Some of them, they felt that what their company was able to provide didn't fit the RFP that we put out. So Carl worked with several other of the vendors, and we expected to at least get 2, honestly, out of this one, and then the other one declined to bid, and so we did only get 1. So it does go out through a lot of channels that people know, you know, that school districts bid on to find a vendor.
All right, thank you.
Maybe even a final piece from our Oakland County Sheriff liaisons and leadership. They highly recommended, as far as when they met with us, that we move towards this direction as well. So they provide us feedback.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of having to do this, Dr. Ryan, but certainly to increase safety for our students in our transportation program. You know, it's great that we have the grant, but you know, it's one of those things that I wish we didn't have to do it, but it seems like the time has come where it's a necessity for the safety of our students.
I also like this only from the standpoint that it might take a little pressure off the actual bus driver. They can keep their eyes on the road as opposed to trying to always monitor what's going on behind them. And I think it's actually good for our bus drivers as well as our students.
Any other comments or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.8 is approval of computer purchase for Shared Time School. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves purchases of Dell computers in the amount of $30,050 as part of our shared service agreement as presented.
Support.
And Dr. Ryan or Mr. Lucido, could you remind us, please, because I know we have a couple of these on here tonight, in terms of the shared service agreement, you know, that this is a part of our agreement with the school, and that the reason we are purchasing supplies, or that we are being asked to approve these purchases, is that it's part of the revenue sharing and part of what we agree to do in some of these cases.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That is exactly right. We can, when we have an agreement with one of our private schools, we have a cost share, and we can pay for salaries of the teachers, or we can pay for supplies that are going to be used for those classes and those students, and that's what this is. And we kind of give the private schools the autonomy to that. Some of the schools we spend 100% on salaries. That's why you don't see requests like this, but some of the schools want to make big purchases like this, and by our board policy, we have to take that even though it's not going into a brick and mortar Clarkston building.
Mr. Lucido, is the cost for these equipments or whatever their choice is within their negotiated share, or is it external to the share?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a cost share that we negotiate with them. It's standard for most of our, for all of our schools. So and basically it's a split. So just hypothetically saying, without going through our contract, and it'll just say it was a 50-50 split on the FTE that we were getting. That means they would be able to spend that 50% of that FTE on salaries for teachers or for supplies. In the cases that we're asking you to approve tonight, those schools are spending that money on supplies, but it is definitely coming out of that cost share.
So it's their money. We just approve it as part of the contract.
Exactly.
Right. Other questions? All right. Motion on the table. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.9 is approval of robotics materials and training for a shared time school.
I move that the Board of Education approves purchases of robotic materials and training in the amount of $82,200 as part of our shared service agreement as presented.
Support.
So similar concept here, just a different school.
Exactly.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.10 is approval of the resolution regarding the Jewel lawsuit settlement. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the settlement and adopts the resolution as presented.
Support.
Questions or discussion?
I'd just like to make a comment. I don't recall how many years ago this was now, but this is something that we brought back from Advocacy Institute in Washington, D.C. on one of our trips, that this lawsuit was a class action being discussed there, and we brought it back, and we signed on to participate, and that is how we became knowledgeable about this money and this money that will come to our district.
Yeah, Rose, it seems like it was rolling around for a while, and Jewel's just one of the several companies that this should be happening in Cascade, and I wanted the board to know that my plans in terms of this revenue is to directly utilize it on student health related programming, whether it be in the weight room or other equipment for students across all of our secondary buildings to find health and wellness within their buildings. And I've already begun negotiations with some students at some of our buildings and what that will materialize at. So I'll be excited to bring back some of the final products as they provide those details to you. So I just wanted to let you know where the intent was coming, so when you see it coming, you know.
And I'm sorry, I don't see an attachment here. Do we know what the amount is?
I believe it's roughly this first round after legal fees, Ms. Rogers, is roughly around 78,000.
It's 82,000, but 41,000 we get right away. Like this year, we'll have it probably in the next month, and then the other approximately 41,000 will be spread over, I think it's 5 years. So we'll see that divided 5 years.
5 years, okay.
And like you said, this is just one. There's more cases out there.
Okay,
But this is just Jewel.
all right. Very good. Any other questions or discussion? Mrs. McLean, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mrs. Egan.
Yes.
Mrs. McGinnis.
Yes.
Mr. Heyer.
Yes.
Mrs. Love.
Yes.
Mrs. Crane.
Yes.
Mrs. Horst.
Yes. The motion carries. Item 6.11 is approval of the 2022-23 budget amendment. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the first amended budget for 2022-2023 as presented.
Support.
Mrs. Rogers, if you'll talk us through the numbers.
This, pretty much every March, we bring you our amended budget, as a lot of things have happened since this was approved back in June originally. And I will go through the first slide, which would be the major revenue adjustments that are in this budget. This, I'm going to say, is probably the biggest changes you're ever going to see, and a lot of it's just all these grants and funding we got that we just don't know in June when we approve it. So if we go to the first slide, the revenue adjustments. The first, I think I go through it. You got about $349,000 in local revenue. That is that settlement you just approved. $41,000 is part of that $349,000. And this is the first year, I think it's probably the first year since I've been here, we've been able to get aggressive after interest. I've been able to start investing money. I haven't done that, I don't think, since I've really been here. And so we were able to get 4.72% interest, and it's going to bring in probably about $250,000. But some of it's going to be into next year's interest. But so we're looking at increasing interest at about $222,000. We've only been getting like $3,000 to $5,000 interest every year. We're going to be. So we've gotten some one-time grants from Oakland schools. The shared service from the RVS is just mainly getting the revenue and expenses where we believe they are right now. Back in June, we didn't know a lot of that yet. So that's just adjusting all them. Special education, between PA funding, IDEA funding, state funding, we are up $1.25 million in our special ed funding from what you adopted in June. State aid funding, we are up $1.7 million. A big chunk of that would be, you guys approved 400. We went with, in the end, we got 450 because we did not have an approved state aid budget when you passed the June budget. That didn't get approved until September. And we didn't lose as many students. So there's just areas there where we see more revenue. Your Title I at risk and MIPS are offset funding. That's always something that we adjust as we see it come in. And all this funding is adjusted to meet what we're getting in our February state aid at this point. And then the Title I at risk funding, those are our full allocations, which are $106,000. And then we did receive another $400,000 in at-risk funding, and we were able to utilize that funding by paying for the coaches that we no longer can pay for through with our ESSER funding, since our ESSER funding is gone. And then we got $35,900 in career tech funding increase in state funding. We carried over another $42,000 in the Marshall Plan grant, which we should have gone this year in the Marshall Plan grant. You won't see that anymore after this school year. And then we received this year $1.735 million in security and mental health grants. That's where you see the bus cameras coming out of, is that funding right there. And then the expense adjustments, you're looking at increases since the June of human resources of 738. Again, your shared service and your RVS, we're adjusting that to meet where we're actually at as of now in our budget. Special ed expenses have gone up $421,000. Your career tech, that $35,900 we get, that's an in and out for us, then we have to spend it on career tech items. Mental health, there's our mental health. I put in expenses to match the revenue that we received, because those are, we have to do above and beyond what we're doing. That can't be stuff that we're already doing. There will be other items that will be coming to you besides the bus things. We've also hired social workers out of those funds. There's a lot of grants going out there in their area. We got the Marshall Plan grant. We had to have the expenses match the revenue. Same with the Title I at risk. We did increase curriculum and school improvement by $100,000 to get through the rest of the school year. And you guys approved the new copier fleet, so I needed to put that in the budget. That was just approved. We will start seeing the copiers come in probably the end of this month, first part of April. We should have the whole fleet in, I would think, sometime in April, all in, ready, and using them. So that's exciting for our staff. Technology, software, Chromebooks, that is also items that have been approved throughout the year. We have expired software agreements that we've I needed to cover. And then back earlier this school year, you guys approved a Chromebook purchase out of general fund. So that's covering all those items. And then basically the rest is just minor miscellaneous. Bus loan is a little bit more expensive this year due to that we had a new lease this summer that we approved, and then some miscellaneous costs, increasing expenditures at 5.7 million. So the revenue has come in a little bit higher than the expenses. So that means right now you've approved just under 2.7 million was what you approved in June surplus, 17.32 fund balance. Now, because the revenue is a little bit higher than the expenses, we will see about an $800,000 higher surplus at 3.5 right now. That's where I see us trending until I bring you the final amended in June, and you'll see the fund balance at 17.08. I know that doesn't make sense that that went down, but the reason it goes down is because now we're working in a higher expense bucket. We are now into like a $120 million school district, where we used to take our fund balance made it out of 110 million. Now, once you, that formula, your denominator is getting bigger. So your fund balance is gonna look like it's going down even though your surpluses are larger, if that makes sense. So that's where we're at with the amended budget. If you have any questions.
Questions for Mrs. Rogers at this point?
One additional detail, as we come into our next meeting, you're next going to hear some of the budget priority pieces. We're going to be revising the board affordability piece based on this. Some of these items, as you saw in the additional revenues, were pretty hefty increases. And you should know that our strategy during this year, as we received those increases during the year, was to undercut and to utilize them for positions that we already had. We didn't look to expand into new positions, but as federal money was disappearing, we were able to then jump this to new state money, which for all factors that Ms. Rogers and I are receiving is that this money is going to be sustainable through at least next couple of years. It's going to be reproducible. So we're happy to kind of base it more on solid ground than 1 and 2 year federal grants. So we're getting on that piece, that transition between the money sources.
Yeah.
And so far it's going well.
Yeah, we, as a district, I feel like I feel like we're in a better position than a lot of other school districts moving forward as we lose this federal ESSER funding. We have spent most of our funding, our ESSER funding, but we just have done really well, got aggressive with the interest. We've gotten aggressive on getting it. Every time we find a grant, we go after it, so we've been aggressive. We should even have some more grants coming in for the final amended budget, and we're still waiting to see if we get awarded. And also the security grants and the mental health grants, they are in the governor's budget to come again for 23-24. So we're looking at probably another million or 1.5 million in security for next school year, and another million or so in mental health grants next year, because she's putting them she's got them as a priority again in the 23-24 state.
So be prepared to see a little bit of a different bottom line when we go to evaluate that affordability piece as we push into next year. But definitely not bad news.
That's good. Well, and thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Rogers, Mr. Lucido, Dr. Ryan. I mean, you've been talking to us about this really for the last year in terms of preparing for the fall off of that federal money, and that's been on our minds now for the last year or two. So I think you've all shown great foresight in keeping us prepared and planning for that. So we're lucky to have the operations and the financial team that we have looking out for us, looking out for our district. I think you've been very proactive with that, and obviously we're seeing the benefit of that now. So thank you very much.
Dr. Ryan, I wanted to commend you and your staff financially at really keeping us informed over the last 3 years on all those federal programs, exactly what we're spending the money on, how thoughtful we were with what we're spending those dollars on. And I really believe we are ahead of almost every other school district in our county in terms of being purposeful and spending those dollars on things that really matter for kids but aren't going to fall off, when the time comes.
Yeah.
And so getting early in there and getting supports funded and having a way to continue those supports, I think, has been phenomenal. And some of those being physical kinds of things, some of them being staffing kinds of things. But I think, collectively working together as a team, us being informed along the way, and then being out ahead of that and having a plan in place, I think the longer range plan has come together, and that's awesome as we move forward. I really appreciate your leadership there.
Thanks, Mr. High. I think it's been a board administration team, and I got to give total credit out to the team in front of me right here. And to the point where I think the media has recognized Clarkston schools and Troy schools as the top two, and I don't know if it's Southeast Michigan or Oakland County in terms of our processing and forward use of those funds. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to approve the 2022-23 budget amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.12 is approval of the expulsion of a Clarkston High School student. And trustees, you have a hard copy of that resolution. This is from the first hearing that we had this evening. May I have a motion, please?
Mrs. Horst, just a point of order, both 6.12 and 6.13 are the exact same language. Is there any way to distinguish without using names or anything, like student A, student B?
Well, can I just say from the first hearing we had this evening?
Okay.
Is that okay?
The resolution attached to 6.12 contains the information to delineate,
Okay.
but
All right.
obviously FERPA would prevent us from
No, I wasn't
identifying the student.
suggesting we do that. I just
Right.
meant, is it okay that they're exactly worded the same?
Yeah, well.
I don't know.
The as presented takes care of that. 'Cause
Okay.
the resolution is attached.
All right.
Right.
So I move the Board of Education adopts a resolution calling for the expulsion of a Clarkston High School student as presented.
Support.
All right, Mrs. McLean, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Crane,
Yes.
Mrs. Egan,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mrs. Love,
I abstain due to a relationship to the family.
Mr. Heyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Horst.
Yes. The motion carries. And item 6.13 is also the approval of an expulsion of a Clarkston High School student. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education adopts a resolution calling for the expulsion of a Clarkston High School student as presented.
Support.
Mrs. McLean, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Heyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Egan,
Yes.
Mrs. Love,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mrs. Crane,
Yes.
Mrs. Horst.
Yes. That motion carries. And that completes our action items. Item 7 is report items. We have none tonight. And item 8 is discussion items. 8.1 is our budget priorities. Turn that over to Dr. Ryan.
Thanks. I'm going to have Mr. Lucido, Ms. Mahoney, and I think in the wings, Ms. Rogers available here. But we wanted to present now, it is March. We're calling back to the yearly budget cycle that starts towards the end of the year when we start talking about pupil accounting and planning for next year, into February where we monitor the state of Michigan and their finances and start to predict what direction it's going to take for our funding for fiscal year 24. It's hard to believe we're already kind of examining the 23-24 school year. And we wanted to come to you this evening in front of that to start to get your feedback on some identified priorities that the administration has had. This is from our team. This is evaluating, looking at our strategic plan and seeing some areas that we see some additional capital investment for next year. I want it to be known this is not representing the goals of Clarkston Schools necessarily in its entirety, because many goals are people-based in things that we do. They don't require necessarily big, large sums of revenue. So we're looking ahead of time where things that we wanted to incorporate in there. We see this as kind of a two-way conversation this evening as well with our board and our community. We wanted to present and get this out and then receive your feedback. And if you have any other suggestions or things that you have in the wings that you want myself or the administration to review, I'd be more than happy to bring that back and kind of vet some of those ideas if there's anything that you feel like that we're missing as we move into that next budget piece, which is the board affordability model with these items added in or additional pieces. And it should also be known that the items as far as the cost right now this evening is tentative. You know, this is kind of an approximation where we think it would be, but before we got too far down the road, we wanted to consult with our board. So Mr. Lucido, Ms. Mahoney, if you'd like to talk about some of the details that we discussed as a team, and I appreciate it this time.
Yep, the student-focused learning, continuing with the one-to-one. We're looking to add 600,000 to our budget for just continuing with that. That is the cost of operating that program. That would be new devices and cases that we estimate would be right around there. So, the other one, Future Pathways Career Counselor. We have career counselors right now. They're housed here, and we would like to move more towards a base where we have someone on site at the high school, potentially even in our other buildings. And it's something we're still evaluating, but we anticipate needing maybe one FTE to do that. And that will just be to continue to give our students different information and opportunities to explore different career pathways. The whole person development, the general education social worker for 100,000. At the high school, we have a break room that is gen ed students and special ed students are taking advantage of in using, and our special ed staff is supporting that. So our psych and social worker at the high school was originally his position is designed to support students with IEPs is being pulled. So we want to add this position, plus with just all the threat assessments, things like that, this would be another person who would be able to help support with that. And we anticipate that FTE being roughly at about 100,000. So, and Nancy's going to talk about the foundational and academical skills areas.
So one important, I think, piece to our advanced program is our CSM Tech, our Clarkston Science and Math Technology Academy. And so we're excited to put money to possibly renew, revise, and bring this program back alive. So this would include additional staff and release time. I'd like to do more of a formal presentation to you in April regarding CSM Tech and our plans to move forward. Curriculum and instructional materials, asking for an additional $200,000 there. I think back in 2010, Dr. Ryan, our curriculum budget was about $1 million. And so I've been operating just a little over 600,000, and so this additional money will really keep our programs alive in terms of resources, professional learning, to keep curriculum and instruction, I think, at its best. And support structure at SMS, this is another exciting piece as we think about building from the elementary up. We're going to target SMS to look at the needs. I've had conversations with Liz Walker, the principal there, and we're leaning into what can we build at SMS around intervention work, coaching work, and so definitely want to come back to you with a more solid plan in the future, and we're excited just to start at the secondary level at SMS.
So our intent would be, again, with your feedback on this and anything else we want to evaluate as we come back, still sticking within the financial parameters or coming back and keeping us way above cash flow borrowing and those type elements in an overall package. So I welcome your questions, feedback.
Let me just go down the row. Mrs. Crane, and we'll just go down one and let everybody weigh in.
Are we gonna have, so you said you're gonna do a CSM Tech in April, okay. And what about like the curriculum? Do we have time frames on any of these, or is this just kind of all pie in the sky? We're just really starting this conversation now.
So I work directly with our subject area coordinators for curriculum, and so we put a budget proposal from all of them, and I approve it in June so they can start moving forward. We begin purchasing July 1. And all those are approved through TLC as well.
Okay. Ms. Egan?
Yes, I'm just wondering, when we look at things like support staff at SMS, we're adding in addition to how many that are already in existence?
So we have 2 coaches right now that are working with the entire secondary division, so all 4 buildings. And my directive to them was, let's start at SMS, and they've done a lot of work at the junior high as well, leaning into RHS, of course, but we have kind of paused on the high school just because we have 2, and we're servicing an entire secondary. So when we look at the needs at SMS, with our students coming out of elementary, we still have some students, and we're getting better. As you know, you've seen the data, but around math and literacy, And so how can we hone in, because our goal is to support these kids as they grow up so that by the time they are at Clarkston High School, they're ready for a future that excites them and prepares them for next steps.
In short, you saw our scores and where we've been able to kind of build in the program in the elementary. I want to do better in our middle school, and I want to build it right up the line.
Because our hope is that when they reach the junior high, we have more students taking honors courses and then advanced placement, IB, CSM Tech, et cetera, as they go into the high school.
Okay, thank you.
And construction tech and everything else. Yep.
Yes.
Poor Ms. Mahoney going back. Based on our, of course, presentation a couple board meetings ago regarding moving forward with our one-on-one at the junior high level, I fully support that. I really think that we, I say this so many times all around the state. I so enjoy that we work so hard to keep our kids younger longer. And I think that keeping our kids younger longer is so crucial to their final success upon graduation in Clarkston that this students-focused learning is just a crucial element of that for me. I'm also extremely supportive of the career counselor and the social worker. We have such high, across the state, our support staff in these areas have such high extreme ratios of student to counselor and social worker that we can do better. And if we have the funds to be able to do it, I think it's a great place to put money and work with students who might need some intervention in their social emotional wellness. The CSM Tech, I've always been a supporter of CSM Tech. We have a great team of leadership teachers there. I think we need to continue to keep that program running. And the support at Sasheville Middle School, I think, is crucial also to feeding that student learning pipeline. So I appreciate all of these.
Thank you. Mr. Heyer?
With regard to CSM Tech, I'd really be interested in your thoughts when you come back for that presentation on how to make it less specific staff dependent as we look at sustainability in the future. That's something definitely when we started that program, it was very innovative to actually go after and recruit specific staff members. It's just not something that happens in education. And so as we kind of run the course and look to revitalize it, I want to think long term and look at that while we have that conversation. And then one of the things is I agree and would like to explore everything else that's on the list. One of the things that I'd like to suggest looking at adding to the list is as we approach implementation of our facilities master plan, like we're going to disrupt learning at the junior high, whether we like that or not, just based on new configurations. We're going to have some costs associated with physical plant, like our utility costs are going to go up because we're going to be ripping the side of the building off and those kinds of things. So how do we have a placeholder in of potentially toward the end of this next school year, we're going to start to see some of that, and I think we will need some additional supports. Not that we necessarily know what that looks like today, but as we think out, whether there's some facility side of that and then personnel side of that to help kids through that process. That's where my head's at.
Thank you, Mr. Heyer.
Yeah, just with the CSM Tech, are we considering bringing back the afternoon classes? Is that where
Absolutely, yes. We're looking at adding a teacher. We're looking at release time for them to collaborate, renew, revise, go see latest and greatest. And so we're taking a year to focus in that, and I'll speak to that in the presentation. But yes, we are bringing back the PM portion.
Awesome.
That PM portion, to be honest, direct with you in the community, won't be sustainable. We're talking they'll have extremely small classes, but the hope is that we're going to use this as a springboard to kind of, again, that reimagining, re-envision part of this.
Right, which I imagine a lot of this conversation will be during your presentation, so I'll just wait on that. And then we'll get a list of the instructional materials that you're thinking of before July.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. This is more of a general increase of the overall budget, so everything has to be approved that we put through. Okay. This is just increasing the pot so we can do more things within the curriculum budget.
And then the support structure at SMS, are we talking about interventionists, or what are we talking about?
That is what we're talking about. I'm just starting the conversation with Liz Walker about the needs and how we can think about what does an intervention look like in a secondary building. And so I have a meeting. I've asked her to do some preliminary work to meet with our coordinators who run the elementary to look at what she currently has and then how we can start blending these programs. And so I start next week to really start, I think, hitting it hard about, okay, so what does this look like at SMS?
Okay, because I support that. I'm a huge fan of interventionists, if I haven't made that clear. I thought at the last presentation, I was told we don't throw money at new projects, and so we were gonna wait a couple years to add more staff to this program. So I'm glad if we've changed our mind, but I guess I'm just making sure, are we talking about more staff, or are we talking about like more
Possibility,
materials?
yes. So we're looking at interventionists where we might hire certified teachers to lead the work around literacy and math, as well as possible coaching. I want to see what Liz is thinking about. I asked her to kind of do some preliminary work before she brought me in and then start finalizing some pieces.
Okay, great. Well, I support that for sure.
Thank you.
And I'll just add a couple of thoughts here. I mean, when you look at this across the board, I mean, you really are looking at a very academically focused set of recommendations, which I'm sure makes, people here very, very happy. And yeah, I absolutely love the idea of moving from the elementary up. I think we've been very thoughtful over the last decade or so whenever we've rolled out sort of a new philosophy or a new initiative, and we've started at the elementary level and then kind of graduated with those students so they take what they're comfortable with and what they're used to and just moved it on and then sort of adapted it to the next building, right? And I have every confidence that Mrs. Walker will figure out how to make this work at the 6th and 7th grade level. But I know we're expecting great things from that. So I mean, if we think that $200,000 is going to make an impact at that level, I'm fine with that. If we think it's going to take more, I mean, I think the board has spoken very clearly and loudly that we want to continue that system of support, the interventionists, the coaches, that model as we move into the secondary level. If you want that interim step at the middle school, okay, but if I would be fine if we wanted to invest even more there. And then I appreciate the conversation that we had earlier when it comes to technology. And so I would just say, I mean, certainly you're looking to us to sort of look at high-level dollar numbers, but can we part and parcel with that in terms of looking at what makes sense, implementation-wise is there as well. So if we are going to sort of look at the long-term implications of one-to-one, and if there are any changes there, that may impact that number, that may not. Anything spur any, I mean, we wanted feedback from everyone, but I don't want to stop any discussion there. Is that enough feedback? Is there anyone else that has other comments or suggestions? Dr. Ryan, how do you feel?
Feel good. I appreciate the feedback.
Okay.
Mhm.
So obviously the budget cycle, speeds up at this point until we end up in June. So look for this to continue to be on our agendas from here on out.
I would just ask, Madam President, that as we get into some of these things, if it makes sense to potentially add a workshop meeting or dive into some of these. We've been doing one meeting a month, and as we get into construction, as we get into some of these curricular changes, I mean, certainly, policy is riveting, but, I think all of us really enjoy being on the school board to talk about these kinds of things that directly impact, kids, and that's what what we want to spend some time on. So if some of these ideas sound like, maybe more than an hour before a meeting, we'd want to commit to that. And I think, potentially adding a workshop in that April, May, even though it's already busy time frame, I'm certainly open to it, but I would leave it in your hands to determine the best way to have these conversations with the board.
Yeah. I mean, my expectation is certainly as and I know our bond committee will certainly report back to me as you start meeting, but my expectation is that we may have to start doing just that as your work begins in earnest.
I would really support that because I don't have the background that you guys have, so I feel I feel rushed on making some of these decisions. And so the more and more we get into it, when you're talking about massive amounts of money, I just, like I said, I'm not against it. Let's just talk about it. Let's slow down, you know. So I would personally really appreciate it if we could.
And I will say, on that note, it is ridiculous that we switch board members in the middle of a fiscal year. Because you jump on, we have all of our plans in place, like, you know, those of us that have been around, like, know exactly where we are in the process. Like,
Right.
how would a new person know, right? And I think it's very natural to have a lot of questions, and, you know, it's like drinking from a fire hose. I feel like it takes at least a couple of years on a school board to even just understand the process. And I think, you know, continuing to ask questions, and, you know, I think any of us would be happy to chat, you know, before meetings and, you know, fill in any gaps that there might be, because it's like jumping on a moving train and you're getting the lay of the land. And so I think, you know, it's very positive to continue to ask questions, because sometimes when you've done it 21 times before, you know, a hearing somebody else's question does make you stop and think. So
Yeah,
I
and
think it's good.
it's good for the public too, because sometimes they don't understand the backgrounds of things too. And people, you know, the 20 people watching at home might appreciate a little bit more background sometimes.
Dozens of
20,
audience
dozens,
members.
and dozens.
I don't know how many people watch, but I think, you know, we want to continue to do our business and be transparent of what we have going on, and,
Right.
you know, working together as a team. I think we do have different perspectives, which, you know, is maybe a segue to the 2 items from now of, you know, how we want to provide different perspectives here on our board team.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. There you go.
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback.
All right, item 8.2 is the first reading of bylaw 0144.1, compensation. Mrs. McGinnis.
So this bylaw is probably one of my favorite. Because he was poking at me a minute ago here. So I don't know how long ago, 10 years probably, because I've been on this board now 16, I cut our pay. So this policy is a update to put our pay back to $30 a meeting. But it also is a revision because the IRS is now requiring the school district, no matter the amount of money that we make, to W-2 us. So in the past, we cut our pay partially to ensure that we stayed under the $600 threshold also. So that is now a moot point, with the IRS now requiring W-2 for our income. So this is just an update in that sense of the IRS ruling, and to put our pay back to $30 a meeting.
I feel like we've been at 30. We've been at 30.
We have
for a
been
while.
at
It's
30?
been about a year.
Well,
yeah.
it's not 30 that's on the website.
Yeah, the web,
That's what's
this
the
particular
confusing part
policy,
then,
I think.
okay.
This was some of our questions with Neola, and why we did a policy provider review is because we were frustrated with how things were.
Right. I looked, it was June of 2020 when you revised this the last time.
Okay.
I have a feeling that was right at the height of COVID. We were closed, either it got lost in the shuffle, or they
terms of
just weren't updating on a timely basis at that point, so.
Well, this bar does have $24 on it also.
Oh,
So
right.
that's partially, and it came
Right.
right from Neola to begin with, right? Okay.
And I think I remember when Mr. Need and I were going through these just one by one, looking at this then, which is why I brought the question to you I did about the committee meetings not being included. I didn't think that this represented our current bylaw, even though it is what was on our website. I know we talked about it before, so that was why I questioned it.
And we do set compensation at the organizational meeting, and we have been setting it as 30. So I don't think this is a change in the rate so
Right.
much as we're just updating
Other
the
than on a
language.
piece of paper
Yeah.
versus what's on our website too.
Right, to me it was more of a question of, yikes, this is not
Yeah.
what we've approved.
And I had raised a question, but I think it was answered for me in terms of checking a box down at the bottom about entertainment expenses and alcoholic beverages not being reimbursable, but I believe I was informed that's in a reimbursement policy, so it doesn't need to be identified in a compensation policy, that's addressed in a reimbursement policy. Am I correct?
Correct, and we actually discussed that
Okay.
because this is income and the other is an expense
Okay.
reimbursement. So they are two different IRS categories of money.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that was detailed somewhere. I mean, it's our practice, certainly.
Right.
Okay. So have we decided, I mean, I know that Mrs. Crane did provide that feedback, and I would concur. I mean, we don't compensate ourselves for committee meetings, and I'm not sure how in the world we would make up 52 meetings. I just find that to be kind of silly language to include in a policy.
Wasn't it 30?
30
A max
meetings
of 30 meetings?
It said 52 somewhere. It was.
36 is the current one.
So,
But in the revised bylaw, it says up to
52.
a total of not more than 52.
so that's what the revision is recommending.
I might need more than $30 a meeting if we met 52 times in a year.
I think we can go ahead and adjust this to the 32. 36.
That we
Okay.
currently have.
Well, and just to note, it's saying that because it's including the committee meetings.
That's what I said.
So if you could, I think you could either say not more than 36 and strike including committee meetings, or
Yes, I would
One
like
or the
to strike the committee meetings because, I mean, I do not want any incentive to create committees.
Right.
The
Correct.
boards that I'm aware of that have language like this have way too many committees, in my opinion.
Okay.
Okay,
I
strike,
mean, we work very well as a committee of the whole. We use committees when we need them. There should be no compensation for that.
Right. Okay,
Good.
so we'll go
Very
back
good.
to 36, up to 36 meetings a year, which is still almost impossible to reach, and we'll strike the committee.
why
Parenthetical.
36?
I don't know.
That's what it was. I mean, 52
12
seems
times
excessive.
If we hit
12 times
24, that's a
3.
busy year.
Yeah. I mean, 3 a month is more than enough. If we were doing, I don't even want to say what the
I
things.
see no reason that it can be a little high. I mean,
Yeah,
we're not gonna meet it,
I
we're not
don't
gonna
even
meet it,
want to
but-
jinx us by throwing out any of the circumstances where we would have that many meetings.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think that was the intent from the policy
No.
committee, so I think you're safe.
Okay.
Ms. McGinnis, do you have what you need?
I do.
to bring
Thank
this
you very
back for a
much.
second reading?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So we'll move on to 8.3, board candidate interviews and appointment process. And so this is the second half, really, of what we have to discuss following our earlier action item regarding Mrs. Catalina's resignation. Is now we are required to appoint a trustee to fill her seat, and we began that process last Monday with the announcement of the resignation and the appointment process. We have a 30-day window within which to do so before the ISD will step in and assist us with that process. And so we announced a call for interested candidates, and we announced a time and date to conduct interviews, which is next Wednesday, the 22nd at 5 p.m. in this room. And then I appreciate everyone responding to my request for some feedback from you in terms of what you are looking for in a new colleague. And this is sort of the summary of that, the graph that you have here in front of you. And so I want to do a couple of things tonight with this discussion. And I want to tell you how I cataloged this, how I sort of consolidated all of your feedback. So I want to determine kind of this criteria. I want to try to come to consensus on how we're going to evaluate these candidates. I want to finalize the process that we're going to use. Well, I guess those are really the two big things, so we'll just leave it there. But I took all of your feedback, and I looked for a lot of the commonalities. I looked for a lot of the themes. Because we can sit up here and we can just ask a bunch of questions, but then, then what, right? And I want us to have some common ways and some, as objective as we can, ways to evaluate people as we sit here and then have to discuss everyone in front of them in an open meeting. And so really, what started happening is I looked at all of the information you provided me in terms of questions you'd want to ask, qualities you were looking for, what interested you about folks that would like to apply for this position, is that some themes started to emerge. And so these were the themes that really emerged. You'll see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. And then underneath that are kind of the biggest repeating bullets, if you will. And I didn't really want to write them as questions per se, because I wasn't sure I wanted us to finalize a list of questions. I just wanted us to have some discussion about how we were going to proceed tonight and how we were going to proceed next Wednesday. But what I was envisioning is this. I was envisioning that we would have a rubric in front of us with these 4 maybe categories. I think one is really more just sort of perfunctory information that I'm going to solicit from the candidates. when we leave here tonight, and anyone else who may apply before the deadline next Monday, 4 o'clock. So there would be a rubric that we would have for each candidate. And then as we come up with the mechanism tonight for how we're going to get information, underneath that rubric, we could each be taking notes. Because there will be things underneath each of those categories, that we each have a different perspective on. But these bullets here are really the things that many of us raised, that showed interest in. There were also several things that some of you had a very singular interest in. I left those off the list for now. It doesn't mean that they can't come up and say a follow-up question, but I didn't want us to focus here necessarily on something that only one person wanted to know, or something that was just simply a yes or no question. I thought that's something I can put on a form that I ask somebody to just fill out, so we have kind of the biographical or the factual information in front of us. I didn't really want to take up the limited time we have with a candidate just saying, so how many kids do you have? And tell us about your employment history. I mean, that to me is, if we're gonna try to get at the heart of someone's interest or their philosophy or how they make decisions or why they're interested or what they want to contribute, that to me is a much better way to spend the limited time we have with candidates than asking them to recite a list of facts that they could put on a piece of paper for us. So that's how I organize this and kind of why some of you may not see some of the things that you put on your list, but know that I still have all of that information kind of off over here. What did Elizabeth call it once on the parking lot, once when we did a workshop? So, okay, so there's that. So I guess first I would like maybe just some conversation here about this in terms of evaluation. Are these the kinds of criteria and the kinds of things that we are looking for? And I guess we have to talk about them, right? We have to. These aren't going to be secret. I mean, my thought is this. I'm talking around things. This is how I get where I want to go. Y'all just bear with me for a minute. So my thought is this, is that when we all come to consensus here in the next handful of minutes, I'd say few, but probably not, handful of minutes, and we go home tonight, is that I will communicate with the people who have indicated their interest to me, and I will tell them these are the areas.
How many do you have so far?
6 so far. That these are the areas that we are going to be, evaluating you on. My proposal would be this. So this is something else I want your feedback on. First, we have to decide how long we're going to give each candidate. And I looked up when we did this before last in 2015, we ran a really tight ship. Like we were running people in and out of here every 4 minutes or so. And that is pretty quick. But we also had 12, 13 candidates. So depending on what number we end up with next Monday, this idea may change. But if we're going to stick with 6 to 8, I would like to propose that we give each candidate 10-ish minutes. We provide the list of these big picture categories and say, here are the areas in which we are going to be evaluating you on. And we invite each candidate to just talk to us. Talk to us for about half the time and say, share with us what you want to share with us. And then we have 5 minutes to follow up in terms of questions. So that's where we can fill in the holes, we can fill in the gaps for us in terms of what they don't share with us, what we still want to know. And I think that gives us plenty of time to each ask a few questions, a couple of questions. So if someone does have a specific question, once we kind of fill in our 4 or 5 categories here, if you have a very particular question that you have to know or you want to know, there's still time to ask it. So that's what I'm thinking in terms of process. So I'm throwing a lot of that out there, and I'm going to let y'all react.
I think 10 minutes-ish per candidate sounds fine up until like maybe 12 candidates.
Yeah,
And then we have to start compressing.
I agree.
I mean, I do not want to be here like all night.
Right. Or we should consider a second day.
Yeah, and I am concerned about that. I mean, I know, obviously, we're talking about it this evening. I believe, I don't see Mrs. Allen here tonight, but I believe the Clarkston News is going to print something, Mrs. McLean, that would come out this week, so that'll be Wednesday. I mean, if we end up with a rush and we have 20 people signed up, I think Mrs. Love is right. We may have to look at a second night. We have spring break in the middle of this, so that would put us into another probably night of interviews, that
I
first
mean,
week of April.
I would say, you know, at that point, potentially decreasing, you know, let's say we had 24. I think we decrease to 5 minutes and then go through that process and decide, do we add another time to talk to some of these candidates even more, right? I mean, like, we can't, I shouldn't say that. We can do whatever we want. Like, I don't think it would be a productive use of our time to spend, you know, 15 minutes with 20 different people, right? In 5 minutes, if we decide we need to know more, you know, we could invite those folks back, you know, for additional time, if we
Yeah.
need it. Now, if we go through it and, you know, we're all in agreement what we want to do, you know, we don't need more time. And so,
So is there gonna be a group, so you're gonna give this out to the people who applied, this list here?
I'm gonna give the categories.
The
And then probably a
categories,
few
okay.
bullets underneath. These are the kinds of things that, you know, so however we sort of hone this list tonight, you know, based on your feedback, I may go back and fine tune this a little bit. So, so I'm still thinking that through, right? And this is where I want your thoughts.
I think it's fine to give this out. I mean, it would be great if you could just, I mean, that's part of what we're evaluating, right? Like,
Right.
can you give the candidate a list of these qualities, and can they talk 5 minutes, you know,
Great.
in make sense and tell us about themselves and how they sort of stack up to these. And if you want to give them a bio sheet that they can bring and just give to us, like, that's a great idea.
I like that idea a lot, and I
do
like
too.
the fact that they can present themselves, because then we get a sense of, pardon me, just their personal style in addressing these topics. And, you know, if there's someone you're thinking, okay, the one before this, like, say you're on the third or fourth person, and maybe you've already had 2 people that you think are better than the person speaking. I mean,
My only thing
if I have no
is-
interest, I won't ask a question, I guess, is what I'm really saying. You know, we can just thank them, or, you know, somebody might want to ask a question because you like that person better and we get a different perspective. But I do like the fact that they would be presenting themselves as opposed to us just asking the same questions from each candidate.
Well, I also like that if they have this information in advance, we don't have to necessarily keep everyone out of the room and sort of, you know, in order to, like, so there aren't cheaters, like the people who go last, you know what I mean? I mean, everyone can be in here because everyone knows what information we're looking for. So we don't have to keep people outside and walk them in one at a time.
I kind of like keeping them outside.
I do too. I do too.
I think that it would be
The last
like
person has
the
best
8th person to go, and you're all listening to the same presentation. You're gonna feel like, well, as already said, in
Right.
I agree.
like our forum, the 4th person, sometimes it was the same answer, and it's like
Yeah.
you have to repeat yourself again. It's embarrassing.
Well, okay, I mean, we
I
can keep
think,
them outside.
I think you get a better
boardroom.
view of who the person is
we could
individually
just send them in here
when
and lock
they're
'em in.
asking,
Just more.
Yeah.
answering
We'll assign that
individually.
test.
And I also like
Okay.
the idea of like them
green
filling
room.
out a standard form, a
We-
biography
that.
sheet, so we can look at
We
that ahead
could
of time.
maybe use the candidate information form that we use when people are running for the board, right? It's just I think it's 3 basic questions. You know, why do you want to be on the board, and tell us a little about your involvement in the community and
Yeah,
the district
I have
and
that from
family
2015,
background. I mean,
yeah.
just really basic. People can put on there whatever they want. You know, they can bring it. You know, maybe we can make copies for us, or I don't know if we can submit it ahead of time or how we want to work that out, but that would be great to be able to read that ahead of time.
Yeah,
And the
well,
other thing too on this list is, I think just, these would be perhaps these are items that we are interested in hearing them talk about, but they don't have to speak to each and every
Oh,
one of
sure.
them.
Right.
And let them pick, because that, I think, tells us too what maybe their priorities
Where
are
their
as a
strength
future
is,
board
too.
person.
Well, we're not giving those little bullet points, right? We're just giving them the 4.
I would give them it all.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think, I mean, it would be unrealistic for any reasonable person to actually check all these boxes.
Right.
right.
Right,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, that's not the intent. The intent is like, these are the kinds of things in this category that, like, you know, maybe you have experience in a certain area, or maybe you have a hot take on a certain item that you'd want to share, maybe you have no knowledge on something else, like, skip that, you know, and I think that's how we're
Right.
gonna get to know, you know, how somebody formulates a 5-minute presentation on themselves.
Exactly.
Are they gonna prepare? Are they gonna wing it? Are they gonna talk for 10 minutes and not even cover half of a section? Like, those are things that would be very important for us to know.
Sure.
and the last one here, in terms of relevant professional and personal experience, that to me is the stuff that goes on the, I mean, some
On
of
the
it,
bio sheet.
goes on the bio sheet. Like, that's why I kind of categorize that at the bottom, so.
I mean, if somebody has been a school board, national school board facilitator or something, I mean, they might want to speak to that, in their 5 minutes, right?
Yeah. So, here's something I had read about that I thought was really interesting, is a way for us then to say, and then what? We get through 6, 8, 10 of these or whatever, and, everyone is sitting in the audience, and then the fun part starts, right, when we have to discuss everybody, or how do we then evaluate? And so if we have these 4 categories, what I would propose is that we each take a few minutes and rank maybe our top 3 candidates in each category. And I think we will very quickly see, and then
Can I suggest maybe we each pick 2 candidates first?
Narrow it.
Yeah.
To like,
well,
we have
okay.
6.
Here's what I'm looking for, though. What I'm looking for, and the reason we're developing these categories, these 4 categories, is I'm looking for a bit of an objective way. I'm looking for a bit of an objective way to evaluate and say, rather than just saying, well, I like Pam and Mike, and you like Sam and Joe, and you like Pam and Joe, and you like Steve and Lewis. I'm making these names up, by the way. I don't know why, right? And then, but there's no, at least this way. I mean, this is the whole reason we've come up with these 4.
I was just thinking, like, instead of, let's say we have 12 folks. Instead of ranking all 12, maybe if we each pick 2, we would end up with 8. Like, let's then rank the 8. We could sort of skip ranking a few people.
Well,
I was just trying to expedite.
well, okay, but to me, I guess maybe, well, what I'm envisioning is that this would expedite it. Maybe, hopefully if it's done right,
We could do
Like,
it wrong.
are you thinking like a consensus ranking?
well, okay, so I would rank people 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 in these 4 categories. You would rank it like that. So we have a whole bunch of number 1s, we have a whole bunch of number 2s, we have a whole bunch of number 3s. And my guess would be is that certain people would rise to the top. I mean, we would see a lot of names over and over and over again. And I'm Mrs. McLean, I'm hoping is going to be here to help me facilitate this process. We would be able to take a quick recess, look at all these, and come back and have 6 sheets and be able to very objectively
So these
say,
are foiable. They're going to be all these,
yeah,
all these tally
well,
sheets.
anything we do is going to be foiable.
Right, but if we don't have a sheet and we just tell you 2 names, 2 names, 2 names. I'm
Well, I
sorry,
understand what you're saying.
if one person is always I'm just being a little bit protective of all the candidates. So if some candidates get none on this tally sheet from every single one of us, this is documentation that can be viewed in the community. I prefer Steve's point, you give 2 names, 2 names, 2 names down there, and then from there, we start working through names.
I just don't want majority rules to be like, oh, well, this guy obviously is popular, so I'm gonna vote for him because my friend did. You know what I'm saying?
Well, majority is going to be the rule of the day.
Well, I know, but
ultimately.
if, like, say we go first and Elizabeth's like, well, this person already got 5 votes, maybe I overlooked something. I don't know, it just seems.
What's the difference between, I guess I see this
I
as
just don't
2.
I don't like the documentation.
I don't know that
Well, it's an
the way you've
uncomfortable
described
position.
it, I don't know that it's much different.
Right.
Because if you're just saying 2 people, and I'm tallying them, and I've got Tim, and I've got Mary Beth. Tim, Mary Beth, Nancy, Mary Beth. And I'm just writing. Oh, look, I've got 6 people. I've got 6 people who like Tim, and I've got 3 people who like Mary Beth, and I've got 2 people who like John. And okay, so it looks like maybe Tim and Mary Beth were the most. You guys are most interested in them. But then we still haven't necessarily said. We haven't necessarily tied that. I guess I'm looking for a way to sort of tie it to some evaluation, to some criteria, where there's some, even if it's subjective data tied to it, rather than just listening to all this and going, I like these 2 people. Now, I can be convinced otherwise, and I understand your point in having sat through this process and been voted down. Yes, people, I can tell you, it sucks no matter which way you slice it. So it's a very unpleasant thing to have to sit through. So I don't know that I don't know that there's a way to make it less unpleasant, whether your name is not on a sheet of paper, or you're never discussed, or you don't make a cut. And I don't know, I guess, help me think through then what that next step is. If we go through that process and two people, and I end up with 6 names, then what? Like, I'm envisioning the way I do it, we'll end up with, say, 3 names that sort of repeated over and over, and then we have kind of a clear direction to discuss.
I would like to maybe see flexibility on the 3, so say that it's really close, then we have 4. Or even 5. I mean, I don't think it'll be that close, but.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I mean, say 2 people vote for, I don't know, if there's a difference of 1 vote or something. I think it would just,
Well, and we're not
see what
necessarily-
happens and then use your
This isn't
discretion.
the formal vote, right? Like, we're just trying to
Yeah,
narrow
to get
it down,
final.
and then we still need a motion and a, an actual support, and then a discussion and a vote.
Right.
On a specific person.
But we would
Like, we're
only
just
vote
trying to-
on those 3 or 4, 3 people.
It's just to try
Not
to get a sense of
necessarily.
where everybody's.
I mean, at any point in the process, any of us can make a motion to appoint a certain candidate, and at that point,
Go through the vote.
if it's seconded, the floor is open for discussion. At some point, we're going to vote on that. And so I think where Mrs. Horst is coming from is from a little post-traumatic stress, I think, rightfully so, of that once upon a time, we went through 7 candidates, one at a time. I move that we appoint this person. 3 fail. I move that we appoint this person. 3 fail. I move that we appoint this person. 3 fail. And that was a very arduous process that I think
I remember,
we
I know,
we could definitely avoid. And so what I think Mrs. Horst is going for is, if there was a way that we could consensus around at least a few people to start, maybe we don't have to go through the whole list to vote no on all of them until we find one that we could all agree on. Is that fair?
I partly, and I'm not denying that was not very fun to sit through, but
On either side of the table.
It gives preferential
Works
treatment,
for
I
us.
think, to
Works
the
for
people
us,
that you're
Mr.
voting on
Meyer.
first, because they have a chance first. So.
well, yeah, but I'm also trying to.
But if you put forward a candidate, I have no idea who anybody is that has applied yet. Your best friend applies, and you motion for them first, and Cheryl thinks, oh, that's a reasonable person. I'll support that, and the rest of us are going, what, her? Like, can't believe, like, no, we're not ready to vote on that. We didn't even talk about my candidate.
Right.
Like, it'd be great if we
Yeah.
could avoid that and
Yeah.
realize, like,
No, I
some
agree.
people would be. Naturally, if we have 6 people or 12 people, naturally some of them are going to be on the bottom of the list. And
Yeah.
we don't need to
Yeah.
go through the arduous task of bouncing them.
So yes,
Of-
that's
of
what I'm
voting
trying to
no.
do. I'm just trying to tie some objectivity to it.
Mhm.
Maybe my way is,
I
maybe in my head it's working better than I'm articulating it.
No, I like your way. I mean, I think I told you when I first replied to you, I like the data. It feels more data-driven to me, and I sat in on a clinic session once where it was a Genesee County district. I can't remember which one, and they had to do this. And it was very much a rubric, a numbers. I mean, so that at the end of the day, the answer is right in front of you because it's, you
I
know.
was gonna assign points and I didn't do
Well,
that.
that's what they did, basically. There was something definitely more. I'm missing a big part of it, I know. But I like at least the first pass being number to even. I don't mind that it's foyable because I wouldn't write down anything that I wouldn't want out there.
Yeah.
But I like that because I do agree that it also gives us a point to jump off on discussion too. Well, this person was the highest in my relevant professional experience, and this is why.
So would we give you want 3 names in each category?
Let's just do 2 names then.
2 names in each category? So it could be the same name, could be different.
Sure.
So we go through, we take a 5-minute recess so we could write names down and think about this. We write our names down and then we come back and we tell you what our names are.
The rubric's going to be written right on their bio sheet.
The rubric is gonna be attached to your bio sheet, so you can make some notes so you're gonna have a bio sheet for each candidate and a rubric for each candidate. This is what I'm gonna give you for each candidate. So you can make your little notes and then you're gonna have a final rubric that's blank, where you can write your 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then as I'm envisioning it. And then, I mean, I think we'll have a very clear sense of, you know, I don't know, I mean, is there a way then to, what I'm looking at is the most popular ones in each category. Somehow we have to, you know, like amalgamate that.
So I'm just trying to envision, when you say 1, 2, 1, 2, by category, are you talking names, or are we assigning some
Names.
score for every person?
No, I don't want scores. I just want, I would want you to say, okay, so look, we've got our 4 categories here, right? Advocacy, commitment to participate, viewpoints, board
So
governance,
we would
right?
go down, and I would say John and Sally were my top 2 in advocacy. Sally and Sammy were the top 2 in boardsmanship. Sammy and Sally were the top 2 in multiple viewpoints.
Yeah, so it'd be like, okay, so John and Sammy and Sally were probably your top 2 candidates.
Yeah.
But now you've at least given me a reason why they're your top 2 candidates, rather than me just looking at you and going, Sally and Sammy. And I think our public is gonna be more on board with that. I think our candidates, that makes a little more sense, and I feel like that's what I'm trying to get to, is a process that's a little more.
I think
Thank
they're
her, she's
very.
the one who told me about the class.
I think they're very, very similar in
I'm
approach,
kidding.
and
I'm kidding. I think it makes sense to do it this way.
I'm willing to try whatever it is that makes sense and be a team player. And I don't know, something on here about working on a team and different viewpoints. I'm on board with all that.
Are you work toward consensus?
I think to just from an Open Meetings Act standpoint, I mean, whatever we do has to be open and transparent. If we recess for a few minutes to tally or something, that's fine. But like, then we have to announce the tally. We can't do a secret ballot or
Well, no,
anything
there's
like
no
that.
secret ballot,
It's
and-
got to be all open. This is what I think.
Well, it sounds like what we're really trying to do at the beginning, and that's just, I mean, maybe we will only have 6. But if we do get more, we want to start to eliminate the obvious, I
Yeah.
guess is, you know, by doing that, what you're saying. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah. And then if we are able to sort of tally all these and look and say, look, really 3 names rose to the top, I can say, look, there's John, there's Sally, and there's Sammy. Those were kind of the names that came up over and over and over again. And then we have a rationale for saying, I move to nominate, which would be the language, doesn't mean we're nominating, means we're discussing them, right? I mean, I move to nominate Sally as the next appoint, whatever the language is gonna be.
To a point, yeah.
Then we can have the discussion, then we can vote. She's approved or not. If she's approved, congratulations. If she's not, she's off the table, and we have 2 others to discuss.
And it would be great to have the conversation to consensus around somebody so we could vote once. Right? If I want a candidate
I know,
and
I like
the
that.
5 of you clearly don't want that candidate and want somebody else, right? Is there really a point in me nominating that
Right.
candidate, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that. It's like the no vote is so awkward and uncomfortable.
I mean,
would
there is. I mean, we
rather-
should just,
If we have top 3 names, and I think that's when we have the discussion before we make a motion,
that would be helpful.
I think. And then hopefully during the discussion,
We
it
come to a
becomes
consensus. A
obvious who we
consensus
want to
follows up.
nominate.
Now, can we have a discussion in general about those 3 without a motion on the table?
Absolutely.
Okay?
I mean, you could, at that point, those are the ones on the table. Are we missing anything? Nope. Then you could say, oh, I would, out of those 3, I think this one checks these boxes better.
Right.
Cheryl says, I agree. Elizabeth says, I see things completely different. Here's what I think. Stephanie's on her own page. And then we decide, like, are we gonna change each other's minds and discuss, or are we ready to, vote and go majority? I mean, it would be great if we agreed. If we can't agree, we gotta have 4 votes.
Sounds good.
Okay. How are we feeling? I'm fine.
Thank you for consolidating all this. I see my concerns and.
Does everyone see their major concerns
Yes.
represented here? Is everyone happy
Some.
with the language? I'm not gonna point out who had a lot of single issue concerns here, but there's obviously, we're making time for people to address things that they wanna see here. So that's what I wanted to do here, was divide that up, so there would be time to follow up with questions.
And we're allowed to ask questions outside of this, right?
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes for the presentation and then 5 minutes for the
That's what our
questions.
goal is.
Yeah. So that's fine.
So they get their 5 minutes. How will we decide who gets to ask a question, or does every one of us get to ask our one question also?
Well, I would think 5 minutes should be enough for everyone to ask a question. We'll just go around.
So they're gonna get to speak for
They
5
have
minutes, and then we're gonna get a
17 seconds to
5-minute
answer.
rebuttal opportunity?
Now, listen, in 2015, they had 4 minutes and everyone asked a question, so.
Well, I don't think everybody's gonna want,
Not
well,
every-
maybe they'll wanna ask a question every time, but I know I won't.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I probably won't.
I feel like we all feed off each other enough to sort of know, and I would hope our same rules would apply. I mean, I'll try to manage this process and just give me a signal if there's something you want to ask, and, you know, if I feel like somebody's dominating, I'll try to spread the love a little bit.
Okay.
Have a gavel.
But do we all agree, like, if we get over, say, 12, we're either shortening the time,
Yes.
adding a second date?
Yeah, we think the
We'll cross
dozen
that bridge
is-
when we get to it, but yeah.
I think just on that note, while we're here, because we're not here again until
Right,
that
not
night.
here again.
So I think my suggestion would be we shorten, and then after we go through it, we decide if we happen to need more time. Hey, we just didn't get to know a couple of these candidates that we need more time with. We could decide at that point at the table, we
Yeah.
need more time.
Yeah, we
I
need
like
to be
that.
just
But
a little flexible.
The clock is ticking though, on our 30 days, and so,
Right.
you know, we do need to move it
Well,
forward.
I'm sorry, what was the date of the resignation? We have 30 days from what day?
Her letter was dated the 5th. Her effective date the 6th. I don't know that matters, the 5th or the
So
6th.
So
We're a
it's not
weekend.
tonight?
It's not.
Monday the 6th.
It's not tonight when
No.
we accepted
No,
it?
Monday
Okay.
the 6th.
That's what I was
So-
But the
wondering.
30 days is a barometer, it's not an absolute. If the-
I think if we're
It's pretty
making progress
absolute.
toward, the ISD is not going to interfere. I mean, obviously,
They see
we're-
you're working on it, and you
Yes.
have calendar
I think
conflicts,
that's
they're
for
gonna
complete
understand.
people that are at a gridlock. That's not for
Right.
us, so.
But we do want to follow the law.
Right. Yes, it is not just the ISD. This is the law. This is in state law, so,
We'll get it done.
okay? All right. Thank you. All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was a bit of a long discussion. And,
Nice work.
we will then move on. We have citizen comments. Citizens are welcome to address the board on any topic at this point on the agenda. And I have one citizen at this time. Ms. Theophilus, do you mind taking a look at the blue sheet, seeing if anyone else has signed up? Okay. Mr. Parkin? You're on. I know. Thank you for being patient. We had a lot to work through this evening. Nice to see you.
So I just got a text from my wife. She wanted to know if I was arrested.
Uh-oh. Did you tell her no? Not as of yet. If you'll
I would
remember.
like to change my topic after learning about the exorbitant salaries, so. Just kidding.
Just kidding. Okay, if you'll remember, you
Tim
remember
Parker,
our rules?
9100 Michigan.
Please go right ahead.
So, in an effort to ensure taxpayers' money and ultimately students stayed within the public schools, on May 6, 2022, our Clarkston School Board unanimously voted for a resolution against school voucher initiatives. Not exactly what one would consider a vote of confidence in our Clarkston schools. Why aren't we so confident in our schools' capabilities that have given the right to choose, a selectively used phrase nowadays, the parents would hands down select Clarkston schools? More recently, we've been told that declining enrollment is in direct relationship to declining birth rates. My 3 grandchildren all reside in Clarkston and attend private schools. We thank God our daughters chose not to participate and continue not to participate in the birth rate decline pandemic. My daughters all attended Clarkston schools, were model students and athletes, and they chose to stay in Clarkston by and large part because of the schools. I nor the DeVos family are funding my grandchildren's school tuition. The phenomenon that someone would pay for a product, never use it, yet scrape and sacrifice in order to afford a more desired product is foreign to us in the business world. The other amazing thing is the number of Clarkston alumni who went to school with my daughters that also send their children to the same private school. It's like attending a Clarkston class reunion every Saturday at the basketball games. The other strange phenomenon is the school's enrollment is growing and has somehow exempt from the lower birth rates experienced throughout Clarkston. In the private sector, sustainability is key, and losing loyal legacy customers is a big red flag. And you need to perform an honest and often painful root cause analysis. As I watch an entire second generation of potential Clarkston schools, including my grandson, running up and down their school's hardwood floor, I can't help but ask my daughters, why do your old teammates send their kids here? My daughter said the same reason we do, Dad, the same reason. So we can dance around enrollment issues, pointing fingers at birth rates, or at the terrible rich people looking for tax shelters who want school choice, but one thing I know for sure, when you point a finger, 3 more are always pointing back at you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barkin. Appreciate your comments. Item 10 is information items. We have a half day for students and parent-teacher conferences coming up on Friday, March 17th. Our special board meeting, as we've just discussed at length, our interview of board candidates will be Wednesday, March 22nd at 5 p.m. in this room. There will be no school for students or staff for spring break, Monday, March 27th through Friday, March 31st. School will resume then on Monday, April 3rd, and our next Board of Education meeting will be Monday, April 10th at 7 p.m. here in this room. Item 11 is adjournment. May I have a motion,
Move
please?
to adjourn.
Support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Clarkston 1 and double.